Live from Liverpool, The Dark Paranormal, Season 18. Hello everyone, and finally it's great to say welcome back to The Dark Paranormal, Season 18, our debut episode. And we begin Season 18 with a spot of irony, because I need to make a few announcements, one of which is that we will be getting to the experiences much quicker. But of course, in making those announcements, we do get to the experience a bit later, but just for episode 1. I need to tell you about some very important changes we're going to make. So firstly, we will not be reading out Patreons' names at the start of the show, but at the end of the show. We debated with our Patreon team removing them completely, just saying thank you in general, or putting them at the beginning or end. And in truth, if you sign up to support this show, you deserve to have your name read out on the main feed. And we both 100% agree that your contribution to the show should be recognised, so it will continue to be. However, doing it this way, firstly, allows me to tell you more about what you're about to experience, and secondly, gives the Patreons their own special unique part at the end of the show. We will still plug Patreon at the beginning of the show, because that's only short, and also there's been a little bit of a change in what they do there too. The second change from our perspective is that the minisodes we released on a Monday throughout the Halloween season, they became really popular, and people asked if we could carry them on. And therefore, from season 18 onwards, we will be releasing 3 shows a week on the main feed. On a Monday, you will receive Dark Realms, which will be a minisode that focuses mainly on places that have attracted paranormal activity and sometimes about some famous or not so famous cases that do need a bit of extra light shone upon them. On a Wednesday, you will receive the rebranded, no longer Dark minisode, but Listener minisode, because it will be an experience sent to us from a listener, which is too short for the main show and too long, arguably, for one of our Dark Bites features. Now, although they always overrun, we will say, for example, the Dark Paranormal's 30 minutes and minisode is 15 minutes apiece, and therefore spread throughout the week on this feed, you will get nothing but a serious and honest look at the true paranormal activity people are encountering, or, in the case of a Monday episode, have encountered. I've said more than enough times, this is your show, and this is me putting my money where my mouth is. You asked for quicker access to the experiences, and with the exception of today and the announcements, that's what's happening. You also shown interest in that Monday slot being a main feature, and that's what's happening too. I'm being exceptionally sincere when I say this is your show, and the day I stop changing the format based on constructive feedback from genuine fans is the day the show dies, and I don't want that to ever happen. And that feedback address is the same address if you have your own personal paranormal experience that you wish to share. Email contact@thedarkparanormal.com. I genuinely believe that the experiences that we have to share throughout season 18 could be our best yet, and if they're not, that blame lies with me in not conveying the experience well enough. Because believe me, when compiling this season, I did have 1 or 2 sleepless nights, I won't lie. But as listeners from old will know, every season, just like the show itself, is in flux. And although I'm more than happy with the season, how it's laid out in front of me, and believe me, it looks amazing, if you have your own experience, send it in. Because I will always find space for the right experience, irrelevant of when it's sent. And the email address, once more, is contact@thedarkparanormal.com. Now, I did say I'd continue to plug Patreon at the start of an episode, and the reason for that is I think we have now built the best, welcoming, most like-minded group of paranormal enthusiasts out there. Not one member of our thousands of members claim to be an expert in anything to do with what we look at, because you simply can't be. I'd like to take the credit for how good that Patreon group is as a community, but I simply can't. It's all down to them. And believe me, as a fan of this since I was 8 years of age, I've been in enough paranormal groups or societies to see the toxicity, to see the need for a want of hierarchy within there, It does not exist in this wonderful place. And when I do a Dark Bites episode for our Patreons every Sunday, it's my favourite place in the world to be. So why would you join? Well, I would personally join for that community itself. But for around the cost of a sitting coffee per month, you will get access to the full Dark Bites back catalogue, a new episode of Dark Bites every week of the year without fail, and access to all of our shows on this feed, both ad-free and before anyone else. So for example, this debut, You're Hearing Friday, was out to our Patreon members on Wednesday. And Monday's new Dark Realms episode, our Patreons are listening to right now, ad-free 3 days before its general release. So if you're a fan of the show and you'd like to support the show and join that wonderful community, head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. Now, I mentioned Patreon are doing things a bit different. What they're doing this year is they're allowing you to buy a Patreon subscription as a gift for someone else. So if you want to become a Patreon and you know a certain someone is going to struggle to get you that particular gift, why not give them a nudge in Patreon's way? That's patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. Now, I want no one to worry. All of our intros going forward, I'm going to promise you, are going to be beneath 3 minutes. That's after the intro music stops. But announcements must be made and changes you must be aware of. And I think we've done that now. So I think the only thing to do is to say, it's time. Lower those lights. Make yourself comfortable, and most importantly, leave your disbelief at the door. As we listen to over 70 years worth of experiences in When Evil Takes Root. Hi, my name is Bry, and after talking for years about submitting, I finally am doing so. Listening to other experiences has made me brave enough to share my own, and know for sure I won't sound crazy. I'm submitting my experiences of growing up in a haunted home. My home that my older siblings and I also lived in, and also experienced many paranormal events. I'll be sharing their events as well as my own. I primarily experienced the bulk of activity, and I did experience a traumatic event in middle school that could be the root of why I experienced these events. If my trauma made me more vulnerable at that perfect age too, if something did need energy in that house, well, mine was perfect for it. The names shared in this are real too, besides for my friends' names in order to keep their privacy. I grew up in Eureka, Missouri, a small town about 30 minutes from downtown St. Louis. A very small town. One that has since grew but is still small. Known for a Six Flags, and filled with countless banks and gas stations and senior living centres. Lots of senior living centres. But there's also a ton of history in Eureka. A little that I will share, as it provides a good backstory to my story. Maybe where the land came from is part of the hauntings. You see, the area was first inhabited by the Shawnee American Indians, until they were forced out. And then it was used as farmland. Eventually it was bought out by builders and they turned the land into real estate. The real estate my parents bought and still live in. The hotel itself in Eureka holds a lot of history, and is known for having the resident ghost Addie, who supposedly died by falling through the window of the barn, and now spends the afterlife haunting the hotel. 2 children have also died in the indoor pool in at least the last 20 years or so. This hotel and one-time carriage stop for travellers who needed a night to stay was perfect, since they had horse stalls, all which are still on the property, albeit used for other things. You can, however, get married in the original barn. It's next to Six Flags, and is where all the tourists will stay to visit Six Flags. We're also about 20 to 25 minutes from Union, Missouri, the popular Screaming House. The history is quite interesting, and a Google search will pull lots of stuff up. My story now is one that consists of many encounters. I will say some encounters stand out more than others, and some are shared with my siblings. My normal is definitely not like most others. I was born in 1989 and lived in Eureka. I grew up there. I moved back home there, and my parents are still living in this house today. My experiences were just that, experiences with the paranormal, over a span of the age of 10 to now, and I'm now 34. My encounters happened mostly between the age of 11 and 18. At this time, the terror I was experiencing was almost traumatizing. I'll do my best to keep things in chronological order, including any important background info, as my parents moved into this house in the early 1960s, and the haunting started then, when my sister Kim and two brothers, John and Bobby, lived in the house with my mum and dad. Their experiences, as well as my sister Heather's, will kick the story of my haunted home off. This submission is 70 plus years in the making. First, important background. My very young parents moved to Eureka, Missouri from St. Louis City around the early 1960s. I believe they bought their home in 1963. It was a freshly built home in a freshly built neighborhood, in a town that was far enough away from crime, but close enough for my dad to commute to work. Eureka was new, it was different, and it was so countryish. My siblings say their friends didn't think they even had running water or electricity. Some background info. My dad, an undercover drugs and violent crimes detective with the St. Louis City Police, sought to move my mum and siblings to a safer environment. Thus, he picked Eureka. My dad remained a St. Louis City lieutenant throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, retiring in the early 90s. When I was born in 1989, I was a surprise. My parents married very young, 16 and 19, and they had their first child shortly after marriage, and two more back to back, John, Bobby, and Kim. They're my three eldest siblings. Bobby died just a few years ago, always my brother. Heather is their fourth, closest in age to me, but still decades apart. I, the complete surprise, was born to my parents at the age of 44 and 47 respectively. We're all horror enthusiasts, and we are all paranormal enthusiasts. But that is because of this home. My dad, not so much. But I would watch him go from a non-believer to absolutely having to believe. I know the house is what has made all of us the way we are. The kind of weird people that are normal, but have insanely haunted home stories. The three eldest siblings, John, Bobby, and Kim, were the first to live there along with my dad and mum. My dad still mostly worked nights, working undercover. So he was gone most nights and went home sleeping. Upon moving in, my siblings explored the land around them, because that's all there was to do in Eureka. We played in the woods as kids, something I'm not sure kids do anymore. Venturing through the woods, it didn't take them long to find scattered tombstones throughout the area, next to our home. Definitely too close for comfort. There were plenty of bare spaces, plenty of spaces where there were cleared, marked cemeteries. What happened to them? No one seemed to know. I also explored the woods as a kid, and at the age of 10, I remember this particular gravestone dated back to the 1800s. This tombstone was by far one of the biggest tombstones I'd ever seen, just thrown in the woods. It was well over 5.5 feet, elaborate with a cross design on top. There were others that were smaller, unreadable. Some were small squares with crosses, which we believe indicate a baby or maybe a small child's passing. And there were lots of those. And lots of broken gravestones, the unreadable ones. To say this was all too close to home is meant in a very literal way. There were many gravestones behind many people's homes, not just our home. They were all unreadable. My siblings, as they have told, thought they hit the jackpot finding these tombstones. As anyone would be, they were entranced. My brother, a history buff, immediately tried to figure out whose land it was. History of the land within my neighbourhood points to a few large farms once having the entire land, and before pushing them out, American Indians had the land. I've always considered this, the original American Indian land, turned farms with gravestones scattered about my backyard woods and others. It wasn't long into living in that home that my siblings and my mum started to experience things. Upstairs, they would hear chaos on the main level, starting with their garage door opening and closing, doors opening and closing, people running up and down the stairs, stomping around the kitchen, and kitchen cabinets flying open and slamming shut. As my siblings would tell me, they were not about to go downstairs, but they would sit on the staircase and peek with the small view into the kitchen that they could see. But seeing the cabinets open and close, with my mum sitting with them, and lights flickering on and off, parties on the outside deck, sounds of a large group of people talking, playing music. They didn't immediately tell my dad what was going on, knowing he wouldn't believe a word of it. John, my brother, was a target of the one or more entities in that home. He was tormented by sounds of a phone in his closet ringing constantly, a doorbell coming from the closet, shaking of the closet doors, and witnessing my mum's glass of wine turn upside down on the table and the wine remained inside. My sister and brother experienced whispering from the walls, hearing the people running up and down the halls, and poltergeist-like activity that would go on in the middle of the night. My siblings did not live at the home long, starting their own life shortly after high school. Heather became an only child at the house. Around middle school age for her, in 1989, I came along, and I'm sure my sister was thrilled. Heather would, of course, experience the normal things that always happen in the house. The whispering, the running up and down the stairs and hall, doors slamming, etc. This, for Heather, all started at puberty age. I never knew girls and puberty seemed to be large triggers for paranormal activity. My siblings would talk about this, asking my mum if anything had started to happen yet in the house, when I was just entering middle school. Not knowing why then, or what they meant by things in the house, as they teased a lot, I was slightly oblivious to what they were implying. But I soon found out. Let's take a quick break in proceedings to talk to you about the holiday season and the M word. Not mistletoe, money. Because food, decorations, presents, they don't come for free. And at this time of year, everyone knows to the last digit what is in their bank account. Well, I know I do anyway. And when I get my statement in January, I look and think, I didn't need to go out then. I didn't need to buy that. I didn't need to buy as many of those. And I kick myself and say, next year, you'll do something better with your money. And that was me rinse and repeat until last year when I actually did. Now, you'll have heard me talk about acorns before, and there's a reason for it, because acorns make it easy to start automatically saving and investing for you, your kids, your retirement, even during the holidays. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you. And you don't need a ton of time. You can create your Acorns account and start automatically investing your money in just 5 minutes. And you don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now. That could be $5 a day or just even your spare change. That's right, Acorns can round every purchase you make up to $1 and automatically invest that spare change for you. So if you buy a coffee on the way to work, that's investing. And you can get bonus investments just for buying the stuff you need from the brands you love. The change I said I made last year, well, I looked at all the excess I would have spent and I invested it. And believe me, guys, that's why Acorns are so important. And I'll be doing the same this year, because when you look at your statement in January and you see you've invested money instead of wasting it, it's a great feeling. So head over to acorns.com/darkparanormal or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. Paid non-client endorsements. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Investment involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/darkparanormal. Let's take a quick break to talk to you about my favorite time of year, the holiday season. It's a special time of year where we see people we may not have seen all year round. And for our American listeners, they get what I call a mini Christmas with Thanksgiving. Us Brits only get Christmas, but I've planned on pranking my sister by talking as much French as I can during Christmas dinner. And the confidence I have in pulling off this prank is all thanks to Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone is the most trusted language learning program available. There's a reason why over 30 years, millions of people have learnt one or many of the 25 languages on offer. And that's because they use fast language acquisition. There is no hand-holding, there's no English translations. The process is so intuitive, you get to pick a language, then listen, speak, and think in that language. And it's so flexible you can learn on the go with your mobile phone or at home on your desktop. A great thing for me is True Accent, their speech recognition program, which will give you feedback on your pronunciation. Don't put off learning that language. There's no better time than right now to get started. And for a short time, Dark Paranormal listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership holiday special. And this offer will not last long. Visit rosettastone.com/today. That's unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your holiday offer at rosettastone.com/today today. For yourself, it's a gift that keeps on giving. Spark something uncommon this holiday with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. If you haven't finished your holiday shopping yet, don't panic. We've got a secret source of incredible original gifts, and that's Uncommon Goods. They've got unique hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Gifts that spark joy, wonder, delight, and that "it's exactly what I wanted" feeling. Somehow they know exactly the perfect gift for every single person you know. So skip the gifts that scream last-minute buy and find something truly original at uncommongoods.com. I've already mentioned they've helped me solve a headache I have each year buying one individual a perfect gift. And I found it on Uncommon Goods, a dream globe. And I know this individual will love it. And this individual is the hardest person to buy for, so I love it too. And when you buy from Uncommon Goods, you're supporting artists, small independent businesses. Uncommon Goods look for products that are high quality, unique, and often handmade or made in the US. Or what about an uncommon experience, more than a virtual class, and something that won't be lost in the mail, including everything from cooking to tarot card reading, they're unexpected opportunities to have fun and connect in new ways. And every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give back $1 to a non-profit partner of your choice. And they've donated more than $3 million to date. So to get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/darkparanormal. That's uncommongoods.com/darkparanormal. And don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. I think by far I had the most intense experience of them all. I imagine it gained energy as time went on, and I can say with all honesty, I was likely a great source of energy to feed off, as I was quite dramatic in high school, always up to something and always having big emotions. When Heather moved out of the home, I was in 5th grade, and the only one home. Although I was the only child, I did become an aunt at 3, so my nephews and nieces are more like brothers and sisters to me. When my nieces and nephews were born, my parents turned one of the rooms into a nursery for them for when they would spend the night. And even now, that room is still called the nursery. It seems like it's got a very nursery feel to it, and it's been called so for over 2 decades. It just feels right. It sounded spooky though, and the room was spooky. There was, or is, something in that room. My friends, when we grew up, were all terrified of the nursery. And to this day, I'll have friends randomly ask me about the nursery, or my home in general, or remind me of a scary story they have about my home, as many people have experienced things here. Family members, friends of mine, and my siblings, etc. I will say whatever haunts this house does not care what it does or who is there. I started having experiences that I can remember vividly around middle school. My earliest memory was hearing things and getting a strange feeling that something or someone was in my room. It suddenly would feel strange. I can't quite pinpoint the feeling, but it felt uneasy, as if someone was in the room with me. I could hear what sounded like a group of kids running up and down the stairs, and because I moved rooms, my room was now next to the stairs and so was my bed. I had my bed against the wall the stairs were adjacent to, and this running was loud, scary loud, and eventually flat out annoying as it was constant some nights. This was right around the time I started sleeping with the covers over my head every single night. I would leave a little hole to breathe out of, but my face was covered. I was terrified, and I remember the fear I still felt under those covers. All of this was enough to send me straight to my parents' room, where I'd often end up. My dad, now a retired policeman, working for a company who owned big hotels in St. Louis, didn't have any time for my tall tales. My mum knew it was true though, but my dad still thought it was silly. Until he had his own experiences involving me. It became more evident to me that my house was different when I tried to have sleepovers. My girlfriends in 5th grade all went home and I was having a sleepover for my birthday party. Why did they leave? Well, they were all crying. They were all afraid. Every one of them claimed to hear different things in the house, and even though I begged everyone to stay, every last girl went home. From then on out, I had hotel birthday parties. Another experience I shared with my nephew, who I'm still very close with. Harry and I decided we wanted to spend the night in my pop-up tent on the deck. This was around 5th or 6th grade. We actually wanted to stay out there because my cat, who was an indoor cat, escaped and was out roaming the woods. We thought if we slept in the tent, it might attract the cat home. So we loaded up with snacks and covers, and we were having our camp out. At some point in the night, we heard noises that we thought may be the cat. So we unzipped the window to the tent, and we saw what looked like a white see-through figure with some sort of dress floating up the deck stairs, past our tent and in to the house. We were too scared to stay outside, so we went in screaming, waking up both my parents and demanding to sleep on their floor. Why we followed it in, I'm not sure, but it felt safer than staying outside. We both remember this very vividly. Harry's sister and my niece, Molly, also had an experience. She was napping in the nursery and woke up crying hysterically, saying she'd seen a dog with red eyes underneath the chair in the room. She still remembers and talks about this incident and said it was clear as day, a dog with bright glowing red eyes staring back at her. There were many nights where Dad would end up running round the home with his gun drawn looking for an intruder, as the noises downstairs sounded like someone had broke in and was turning the house upside down. but he never found anyone or anything. Whenever this took place, my bed for the night would be my parents' bedroom floor. But the night that made my dad a believer was a night where we were all woken up to something that sounded like a broken window from downstairs, followed by people running around. I fully expected my dad to come running out with his gun, as he did. And when he was done searching the house, he stood in my front room to tell me to go to sleep on their floor. He was still apprehensive of what he heard, and not finding anything, I could see strain and confusion on his face. With me repeating, "I told you we've heard things in this house," he stood there. The beads, which I had dangling from the top of my door frame, were then ripped down, one strand at a time. There's no explanation for what happened. Watching the 16 strands or so of that beads getting yanked off my door one by one felt like an eternity. My stomach was in my mouth. My dad was flat out shocked. I sprinted to their bedroom, and my dad later tried to tell me it was possibly my grandma who had passed, just coming by to say hi. Well, this is laughable. Though my grandma had just died, it most certainly wasn't her. I definitely did not get a good feeling when this entity was around, and it thrived off my fear. I understood this before I even understood what was happening to me. Among many of the encounters I had, there are two that I most often share with people, as they are the ones that are just so bone-chilling, I can't believe they even happened. Although I know I vividly remember them, and they definitely did. Growing up, telling this story, I was told I was crazy, and still am told that. But I know what I experienced, and I know at least someone can attest somewhere to what happened to me. Someone must have had the same experience, or be able to at least answer my biggest question. What was it? The night the biggest event I experienced happened, I demanded my bed be moved to the wall shared with the nursery. I think I was a week into the move and feeling good and safe, finally getting a full night's sleep, and things were quiet in the house. Apart from large events, there were always little things going on, but nothing had happened for quite a bit. I still did my typical routine, pulling the blankets fully over me, and I fell asleep. Waking up sometime in the middle of the night due to hearing footsteps down the hall, hearing the nursery's door close, and then complete silence for 15 minutes or so. Next thing, there came the loudest booming noises on the wall I shared with that room. It wasn't a knock on the wall, it was a boom on the wall. It didn't even sound like it was hitting a wall, but it was most certainly hitting my wall. It sounded like it might break through the wall at any moment, and somebody may be beckoning through. I opened my eyes and peeked out. I saw the pictures shaking on my wall with each boom. They lasted about 3 seconds. Again, it was indescribably loud, like a sound a dungeon door would make being slammed and echoing. Eventually the pictures flew off the wall, 3 large framed posters, and shattered. And then it stopped. There were maybe 3 or 5 booms I honestly don't remember. I was too terrified, trying to scream for my parents, but nothing was coming out. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, and I was not about to put my feet on the ground or go out into that hallway. It was the crashing sound of my posters falling to the floor and shattering, not the booms, that made my parents come running in. In disbelief, seeing the pictures shattered on the floor and me hysterical, my parents did not believe my story. I remember my mum talking to my siblings about it the next day, but I know she believes me, as I've held on to this experience my entire life. There was no one in that room, and there was no one anyone could make that type of noise. The booming was deep, loud. It didn't sound like something hitting a wall. I've nothing to compare it to. This was by far, to this day, one of the most bone-chilling experiences I've ever had. I can't describe the panic inside me. I was flat out terrified of whatever was on the other side of that wall. The other experience isn't one that scared me so much, but has intrigued me and posed so many questions. To this day, I've tried to research what I saw, but I've come up with nothing. I'm hoping to get maybe some answers from sharing this story. Shortly after the booming on the wall, I got a camcorder for Christmas. I remember asking for a camcorder so I could record that nursery at night. I was determined to catch whatever it was on camera. And not long after having the camcorder, around 14 or 15, I decided I would set it up in the nursery, with a blank tape on record. To my surprise, I caught something I can't explain. About 30 minutes into the recording, I can only describe it as a very small blue light that grew bigger and bigger and bigger, brighter and brighter, and eventually exploded. And then the screen went black. You could clearly see the room with the light that was glowing in the centre. I was able to show a few friends and my mum before my nephews recorded over the tape, when they used the camcorder without my permission. But the image of the blue ball is burnt into my head, and I still get chills thinking about it. It wasn't an orb, at least not one I've ever seen before. It was a tiny light that got bigger and bluer until it burst, with white light filling the camera screen. I'm sure some will question if I used a Ouija board, and yes, I did use the Ouija board. However, I wouldn't allow my friends to use it at my parents' home. We used it once at another friend's home. Only me and my friend we'll call Lynn were using the board. The other friends were sat on the couch refusing to take part. We placed our fingers on the planchette and asked if anything or anyone was in the room. We ended up finding out the person coming through the board was our friend's uncle who had recently passed. After asking the entity for a sign, the phone started ringing and lighting up. Eventually, we got to the point of the entity wanting my friend to pass on a message to her cousin, as her uncle and cousin were estranged. My friend and I had no idea about her uncle passing, or the rift between her uncle and cousin. She refused to pass along the message. But then I realised I might be more sensitive to the paranormal. Eventually, when I was 17, I gave in to the pushing from Lynn to use the board at my house. So, just her and I in my room used the Ouija board. And it didn't take long for something to come through. And with our fingers not even touching the planchette, it started moving, answering questions. The entity on the other side claimed to be a little girl, someone who apparently watched over me and kept me safe, someone who claimed to have died in a fire at a young age. At this time, we were unaware of the use of children to cover up something bad being on the other side, a way to gain empathy, which is basically what it did. It gained our empathy and trust. She said she sat on the edge of my bed at night, claiming there were many entities in the house, both good and bad. Eventually, we were done using the board, and we forced the planchette to goodbye, because I still fear what happened. Mentioning the name that was given scares me, but it did say her name was Hillary. Hillary was 9, and she did ask during the session if she could remain. I regretfully said yes. A few days after this, I'm telling another friend of mine what happened. They informed me to stop talking about it, go home and speak in my room and tell her she's no longer allowed. I still didn't see what the big deal was. It took years to realise exactly what we did and what I'd allowed. I left home for uni, completed uni, got married, got divorced, and I moved back to Eureka. I lived down the street from my parents' home for a while, and only recently moved out of their neighbourhood, but I still remain in Eureka. My mum still experiences things from time to time. She often awakens to entities coming through her room in the middle of the night. A man she has seen numerous times. Occasionally, he comes with other people who she will never see again. My brother recently passed away from colon cancer. Each of my siblings have been visited by him in some way or another. My mum, days after his death, saw him standing over her in her room. My brother's passing prompted me to think how each of my siblings all have some sort of disease that is not passed down through our family line. My sister will be going on her second kidney transplant sometime this year. All of my siblings have Crohn's disease. My brother, who is alive, has an array of illnesses, making him wheelchair-bound and in far worse health than my 81-year-old dad. My brother, who died, was in the best health of all of us. Although he lived with Crohn's, his death was shocking, and it made me wonder if something in the house caused them to be ill. I, thankfully, am pretty much healthy. However, my life has been filled with trauma, starting at a young age and continuing into adulthood. I'd say my life experiences are more than what the average person experiences. Sometimes it seems like every time I turn around, something bad is happening. Now I can take personal accountability for choosing wrong paths in life. However, most of my bad luck is just that. Really bad luck. And it makes me think, is something attached to me? Did I open something up using the Ouija board? Or make it worse? Make me worse? There's no ending to this. The eerie feeling I get when I go into certain rooms of my parents' home still exists. Strange events still exist. My mum having the most recent encounter that lasted days, involving a ball she randomly found on the top of their water heater. A medium-sized rubber ball. My parents are neat freaks to the extreme. My mum would have known if that ball had ever been in the home. She took the ball and put it on her dresser, upstairs in their room, so she could show my dad later. When she went to get it, the ball was gone. She came back downstairs and sat down feeling apprehensive to tell my dad about a ball that she'd found and then had disappeared. When she looked at my dad, the ball was sitting next to his feet. I know, this sounds like a prank. Maybe my dad was just messing with her. But he swears he knows nothing about the ball. And quite frankly, he just wouldn't make my mum feel crazy by doing that. He may have been a policeman, but he is empathetic. Anyways, my dad put the ball on his end table, next to his chair he sat in the living room. The next day, the ball again was gone. My siblings and I share a text thread with my mum and dad. One of my sisters told her to ask for the ball back and see what happens. Just go out and say it in the family room, she suggested. My mum done just that. She asked out loud if she could please have the ball back. The ball showed up a day later on top of the water heater. Whatever is in that house is still active. I still would say I experience paranormal activity, even away from their home. I sometimes will get the same uncomfortable, odd sensation over me that I would get in my room growing up. When it felt as though someone or something had came in and I still think about my family home often. And my parents hope to leave the home to me. If it pans out that way, would I move back? Definitely. I'm not sure what's in that home, but I think it's multiple things. A poltergeist, potentially. Something more evil that was never human? A dark spirit or shadow figure? Potentially. Is there some good energy there as well? I know for sure that my experiences are ones that most don't ever have with the other side. Ever. But I did. For 6 to 8 years at the most active. I was tormented nightly by something I will probably never know, but hope to get insight here and some opinions from people listening. My home's hauntings remain a topic of conversation, and all of my friends have memories or experiences of their own. I hope my submission and experiences bring answers, as God knows I've searched for them. I hope to hear opinions of people who might have had countless stories of the paranormal and may have heard something similar to mine. And I hope to know if I myself should consider the experiences I still have ones that I may let in on my own attachments from the home, possibly being, overall, more sensitive than the others. Many thanks, Bri. Well, Bri, first and foremost, thank you so much for being our debut episode for Season 18 of The Dark Paranormal. There is so much that I want to pick apart about that story. I want to speak to your parents. I want to speak to your siblings. There is a lot of information that is sort of alluded to that we will never know because it's not a co-written piece. It's a fantastically informative piece that collectively, if I'm being perfectly honest, sounds more to do with the land and the people who live on that particular land. I don't think it's coincidental, obviously, that there are broken tombstones in your backyard. I'd be fascinated to know what your neighbours experience, if anything, with them living on the same land. Because from the way you describe the land, it does sound like the whole area may be prone to these sort of infestations, if you will. I will say the one thing that you mentioned, which did make me think, well now, anything goes, was the use of the Ouija board. Yes, you've done it first in a friend's house, and then you've done it in your own home. And people often think if I don't do it in my home, I'm fine. But you need to remember what you bring through sometimes is looking for the easiest person to feed off, not necessarily to live in that house. It might be looking for an individual to dwell within, or at least alongside. And when that Ouija board was mentioned, any prior theories I was trying to weave together were kind of thrown up in the air. Because, to use a really bad analogy, as I like to do, it would be like if you stood outside your home as there was an earthquake and you heard things getting smashed about in your living room, and then 20 strangers with bricks turned up and all threw them through your living room window. When you went into the home, your TV would be smashed, your DVD player, whichever else, and you wouldn't know exactly what was caused by a neighbour with a brick or by the earthquake. And therefore there's no point speculating because you will never know. And for me, that's where we're at with this experience. Now, there may well be listeners out there who can hear what you're saying and say, no, I can tell you exactly what's going on. And if you are that person, please do get in touch. contact@thedarkparanormal.com. But thank you, Bri. I really enjoyed this experience because it's one of those experiences very similar to the ones we receive on Dark Bites, where it makes you think. It makes you try to look for reasons why things have happened. Causality. So please do keep us informed if anything else takes place either at your parents' house or with you yourself. And once again, thank you for your submission. Before we sign off, it is of course the most wonderful time of the year, allegedly. And don't forget, as I mentioned at the start, Patreon are now offering you the chance to gift somebody else a subscription to their favourite podcast. Head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal and you can do so for this show, which, as I mentioned earlier, means you can gain everything on this feed before anyone else and ad-free And not only that, you can also gain access to our Patreon-only podcast, Dark Bites. The show releases every Sunday of the year without fail, and there's a back catalogue of over 70 hours worth of Patreon-only material for you to go and binge. But knowing what I know of the community of this Patreon, that's the reason I would join. You're not joining a toxic community. You're not joining a paranormal community of know-it-alls or people who think they deserve to be held in higher esteem than anyone else. There's no hierarchical structure in place, meaning you'll never encounter anyone calling themselves founder member or waiting for your post to be approved by a senior admin member. It's an open forum where we expect the people who join to be like us, open-minded, like-minded paranormal enthusiasts who only have two rules, one of which is respect each other's opinion, and secondly, respect each other's experiences, whether you agree with them or not. As I said at the start, and I meant it, a Sunday when I record Dark Bites is my favourite time of the week. I genuinely feel like I'm in a room full of friends, even though it's just me talking to a microphone. It's less formal, there are more experiences to discuss, and it leaves a lot of jump-off points for people with the interest to do so, to go and research more. And it's that wonderful community which is extending a special invite just for you. Simply head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. Just like the following wonderful new team members have: Pooja Subiye, Brandy Ackerman, Rachel Layeth, Kea, Vanessa Saxby, Noah, Chris, Nicole Babauer, Keith Morgan, Adi Millers, Quinn Pallone, Juliana Baraldo Sholia, Andy, Julia Hall, Izzy Rundle, Ruby, Jane Guyan, Crystal McKen, Linda Sheets, Daniel Sneed, Ryan, Grace, and Eva/Matt. Thank you so much for the support, guys, and for joining the team. It keeps the show going, it gives you more content, and it genuinely means the world to me. So I sincerely thank each and every one of you for joining our wonderful community. So if all of those perks sound like your cup of tea, or you know someone who likes the show and you'd like to gift them a subscription, head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. It's been great to be back with you all again, and as we close our first chapter of Season 18, remember, whenever you're discussing the paranormal, always try and leave some of your disbelief at the door. And I'll see you next time, right here on The Dark Paranormal.